The Galactic Council's most prestigious academy buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered for the annual Strategic Combat Assessment. Commander HFY, a towering Vorthak with crystalline skin that reflected the station's harsh lights, surveyed the assembled cadets with barely concealed disdain. His 4 eyes swept across the crowd, pausing momentarily on each species. The agile Zelrani with their graceful movements, the hulking Gorvani with their natural armor, the telepathic Mindari, whose thoughts crackled with barely contained power. Then his gaze landed on the human. Marcus Chen sat alone in the far corner of the briefing hall, his unremarkable brown hair falling across equally unremarkable brown eyes. While other species clustered in their respective groups, sharing boasts and strategies, the human remained silent. His posture was relaxed, almost lazy, as he leaned back in his chair with his hands clasped behind his head. To any observer, he appeared completely disinterested in the proceedings. "Look at that pathetic creature," whispered Thisara, a sleek serpentine whose scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns of amusement. "The humans sent only one representative, and he looks like he'd rather be sleeping." Her companion, a heavily muscled Brutari named Gorton, rumbled with laughter. "I heard their homeworld is barely past the industrial age. What could they possibly contribute to a combat assessment? Their ships are held together with primitive alloys and chemical rockets." The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Species that had been natural enemies for millennia found common ground in their shared mockery of the silent human. Even the normally diplomatic ethereals, beings of pure energy who rarely expressed emotion, flickered with what could only be interpreted as amusement. Commander HFY called for attention, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived 100 battles across the galaxy's most dangerous sectors. "Cadets, you have been selected as the finest warriors your species have to offer. Over the next 4 cycles, you will be tested in ways that will push your abilities to their absolute limits. Some of you will emerge as officers worthy of commanding fleets. Others will return home in failure." The commander's gaze fixed on Marcus, and his expression hardened further. "The Terran Confederation has seen fit to send us a single representative. Human, state your name and qualifications for the record." Marcus slowly straightened in his chair, his movements unhurried, despite the weight of hundreds of hostile stares. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the silent hall. "Marcus Chen, civilian contractor." A wave of derisive laughter erupted from the assembled cadets. Civilian contractor? Not even a proper soldier? The Zelrani delegation exchanged glances of pure disbelief, while the Gorvani simply shook their massive heads in disgust. "Contractor?" Commander HFY's voice dripped with contempt. "What manner of contractor does Earth believe qualifies for the Strategic Combat Assessment?" "Systems analyst," Marcus replied with the same calm tone, as if he were discussing the weather rather than defending his presence among the galaxy's elite warriors. The laughter grew louder. Thisara's scales flashed brilliant orange with mirth. "A systems analyst! They sent us an accountant!" Gorton's massive fist slammed into his palm with a sound like thunder. "This is an insult to every warrior here. My people have trained since birth for this honor, and they mock us with a pencil pusher." Commander HFY raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "Very well, Analyst Chen. Perhaps you can enlighten us about your species' military capabilities. What grand strategies has Earth developed? What mighty fleets do you command?" Marcus considered the question for a moment, his expression remaining perfectly neutral. "Earth's military doctrine is primarily defensive in nature. We focus on cost-effective solutions and resource optimization." The mockery reached new heights. "Cost-effective solutions," howled a Christek, whose geometric form sparkled with static electricity. "While we master the art of war, they master the art of accounting." An avian representative, her feathered crest raised in aggression, squawked her disdain. My people have conquered 17 systems through superior aerial tactics. What has your species conquered, human? Nothing, Marcus answered simply. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Nothing. While every other species in the hall could boast of conquered worlds, defeated enemies, and glorious victories, the human representative admitted to conquering nothing. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into the loudest laughter yet. Commander HFY himself seemed taken aback by the human's honesty. In a galaxy where strength determined survival and conquest proved worth, admitting to conquering nothing was tantamount to admitting complete irrelevance. Perhaps, the commander said slowly, Earth would be better served by sending actual warriors to future assessments. This seems to be a waste of everyone's time. Marcus simply nodded. Perhaps. As the briefing continued, the other cadets began forming natural alliances. The Vorthak and Brutari, both species that valued strength above all else, gravitated toward each other. The more intellectual races like the Mindari and Christek formed their own coalition, planning to use superior technology and tactics to overcome brute force. Even traditionally, neutral species began choosing sides, recognizing that isolation meant elimination. Only Marcus remained alone. During the meal period, the human sat at an empty table, methodically eating his rations while the hall buzzed with strategic discussions and alliance negotiations. Occasionally, groups of cadets would walk past his table, making loud comments about the accountant or Earth's finest warrior. Marcus never looked up, never responded, never showed any sign that their words affected him. Thisara slithered over to his table, her scales now pulsing with predatory interest. Tell me, little human, what is it like to represent an entire species when you know you're completely outmatched? Marcus chewed thoughtfully before answering. I imagine it's similar to what you're experiencing right now. The serpentine's scales flashed red with anger. How dare you? My people have ruled the Outer Rim for 3,000 years. Ruled, Marcus repeated quietly. Past tense. Before Thisara could respond, Gorton's massive form loomed over the table. You have quite the mouth for someone who will be eliminated in the first challenge, human. Marcus looked up at the Brutari, and for just a moment something flickered behind his calm brown eyes. Something that made Gorton take an involuntary step backward before he caught himself. The challenges haven't started yet, Marcus said mildly. As the other cadets dispersed to their quarters, Marcus remained in the common area, staring out at the stars through the massive viewport. Commander HFY approached, his crystalline features reflecting the starlight. I've reviewed your file, Chen, the commander said. It's surprisingly sparse. No military service, no combat training, no advanced education. How did you qualify for this assessment? Marcus was quiet for so long that HFY wondered if he intended to answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I volunteered. The commander frowned. That's not possible. The selection process is rigorous. Only the most qualified candidates are chosen. I volunteered, Marcus repeated, still staring at the stars. HFY followed his gaze to the viewport, where the distant lights of 1,000 worlds twinkled in the darkness. What do you see out there, human? For the first time since arriving at the academy, Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Home, he said. As the commander walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to the quiet human than anyone realized. But by then, it was too late to change anything. The assessment would begin at dawn, and whatever secrets Marcus Chen carried would either save him or destroy him. In his quarters that night, Marcus sat in meditation, his breathing slow and controlled. Tomorrow would begin the real test, and he would finally be able to stop pretending to be something he wasn't. Tomorrow, the galaxy would begin to understand why Earth had sent only one representative. Tomorrow, they would learn what it meant to face the Reaper. The first challenge materialized as a massive holographic arena in the Academy's central training facility. The simulation depicted an urban warfare scenario on a contested moon, complete with crumbling buildings, debris-filled streets, and multiple hostile positions. 50 cadets would enter, but only 25 would advance to the next round. Commander HFY's voice echoed through the facility as the cadets assembled. Your mission is simple. Survive and eliminate your competition. The simulation will last exactly 2 hours. Any cadet who dies in the simulation will be immediately disqualified. Weapons and equipment appropriate to your species' physiology have been provided. The other cadets moved with practiced efficiency, checking their gear and forming their pre-planned alliances. The Vorthak Brutari coalition had already claimed the high ground, their combined strength and tactical knowledge making them formidable opponents. The Mindari led their intellectual alliance toward the simulation's control centers, planning to hack the environment to their advantage. Marcus stood alone at the entrance, carrying only a simple combat knife and what appeared to be standard-issue human body armor. No energy weapons, no advanced technology, no allies to watch his back. Several cadets paused to stare, wondering if the human had simply given up before the challenge even began. "Look at him," whispered Veltar, a spider-like arachnid whose multiple eyes tracked Marcus's every movement. "He doesn't even understand what's happening." Thaisara coiled near the entrance, her venomous fangs glistening. "Perhaps we should put him out of his misery quickly. It would be merciful." As the countdown reached 0, the cadets scattered into the simulation like a pack of predators seeking prey. The Zelrani bounded across rooftops with impossible grace, while the Gorvani smashed through walls rather than bothering with doors. Energy weapons crackled, psychic powers warped reality, and the urban landscape became a three-dimensional battlefield where death lurked around every corner. Marcus walked. Not ran, not sprinted, not tactical advanced. He simply walked down the main street as if he were taking a leisurely stroll through a park. Explosions erupted around him, plasma bolts sizzled past his head, and the sounds of battle echoed from every direction. Through it all, the human maintained the same unhurried pace. From their observation deck, the Academy instructors watched in bewilderment. "What is he doing?" demanded Professor Korvath, a distinguished ethereal whose energy form flickered with confusion. "He's walking directly into the most contested area of the battlefield. Perhaps he's accepted defeat," suggested another instructor. "Some species have philosophical approaches to combat that prioritize honor over victory." Commander HFY said nothing, but his 4 eyes never left the human's figure on the tactical display. Something about Marcus's movement patterns seemed familiar, though he couldn't quite place where he'd seen them before. In the simulation, the first eliminations began almost immediately. A Christek cadet, overconfident in his species' energy manipulation abilities, walked directly into a trap set by the arachnids and was dissolved by concentrated acid. 3 avian scouts, attempting to coordinate from the sky, were brought down by combined fire from the ground-based alliance. Marcus continued walking. A group of Serpentine cadets, led by Thaisara herself, had set up an ambush in a collapsed building overlooking the main thoroughfare. Their plan was simple: wait for isolated targets to pass beneath them, then strike with coordinated precision. It was a textbook maneuver that had served their species well for millennia. "Target approaching!" hissed one of Thaisara's companions. "Single human, no visible weapons except a blade." "Perfect." Thaisara's scales rippled with anticipation. "We'll make this quick." As Marcus passed directly beneath their position, the Serpentines struck. 5 warriors dropped from above simultaneously, their movements perfectly synchronized. their venomous fangs ready to deliver paralytic toxins that would end the fight before it truly began. Marcus didn't look up. He didn't dodge, didn't roll, didn't even break stride. The knife appeared in his hand as if it had materialized from thin air. The blade moved once, twice, 3 times in movements so fast they barely registered on the simulation's sensors. By the time the serpentines hit the ground, 3 of them were already dissolving into the telltale sparkles that indicated elimination. Thesara landed hard, her left arm hanging uselessly at her side where the human's blade had found the precise gap between her armored scales. "Impossible," she gasped. "No one moves that fast." Marcus finally stopped walking. He turned to face her, and she saw his eyes clearly for the first time. They were still brown, still unremarkable, but there was something in their depths that made her survival instincts scream warnings her conscious mind couldn't understand. "You're bleeding," Marcus observed calmly. "You should withdraw from the simulation." "I'll kill you for this insult!" Thesara launched herself forward, her remaining functional arm extended, her fangs dripping with enough venom to drop a Gorvani. The knife moved again. Thesara dissolved mid-leap. Marcus resumed walking. The observation deck fell silent. Professor Korvath's energy form flickered rapidly, the ethereal equivalent of stammering. "Did you see that? The speed, the precision? How did he know exactly where their armor was weakest?" "Replay the sequence," Commander Zexhai ordered, his voice tight with concentration. The holographic display showed the engagement again, this time in slow motion. Even at reduced speed, Marcus's movements were almost too fast to follow. But more disturbing was the precision. Each strike had found the exact spot where serpentine armor was thinnest, where their natural defenses were weakest. The human had demonstrated intimate knowledge of alien anatomy that should have been impossible for someone with no combat training. "Run an analysis on his movement patterns," the commander ordered. "Cross-reference with all known human combat techniques." While the computers worked, the simulation continued. The Mindari Alliance had successfully hacked several automated defense systems and were using them to eliminate other cadets from safety. The Vorthak Brutari coalition controlled nearly a quarter of the battlefield and was systematically hunting down isolated opponents. Marcus walked through the middle of both groups without encountering resistance. This wasn't because he was avoiding them. The tracking systems clearly showed his path taking him directly through contested areas, past hidden sniper nests, and around corners where ambushes waited. But somehow he never quite occupied the same space as his enemies. He moved like smoke through the battlefield, present but untouchable. "Computer analysis complete," announced the tactical AI. "Movement patterns show no correlation with known human combat techniques. Closest match found in historical databases." "Historical?" Commander Zexhai's crystalline features reflected his confusion. "What historical records?" "Classified Vorthak military files. Pattern match. 87% correlation with documented movements of the entity designated the Reaper." The observation deck became deathly quiet. Every instructor knew that name, though few spoke it aloud. The Reaper was a legend from the darkest days of the Galactic Wars, a phantom that had eliminated entire enemy units without leaving evidence of its presence. Most considered it propaganda, a myth created to explain defeats too embarrassing to acknowledge. "That's impossible." Professor Korvath's voice carried none of its usual academic certainty. "The Reaper was never confirmed to exist, and even if it had, those events occurred before humanity achieved spaceflight." Commander Zexhai's 4 eyes remained fixed on the display, where Marcus continued his leisurely stroll through a battlefield that was claiming victims every few minutes. "Show me the pattern comparison." The holographic display split, showing Marcus's current movement alongside archived footage from a battle that had occurred 3 decades earlier. The similarity was unmistakable, the same unhurried pace, the same impossible ability to avoid detection, the same precise knowledge of when and where to strike. "Sir," one of the younger instructors ventured, "perhaps it's coincidence? Convergent evolution of tactics?" Before the commander could respond, the simulation's audio pickups transmitted a new development. Gorton, the massive Brutari warrior, had cornered what he believed to be an easy target. His prey was the quiet human who had been walking through the battlefield like a tourist. "Finally," Gorton's voice boomed through the speakers, "I was hoping we'd meet, little accountant. Time to show you what real warriors look like." Marcus stopped walking. For the first time since entering the simulation, he turned to face an opponent directly. "You've been looking for me specifically?" Marcus asked, his tone carrying genuine curiosity. "My people value strength above all else." Gorton flexed muscles that could crush steel. "Defeating you will prove that humans have no place among warriors." "I see." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And after you defeat me?" "After?" Gorton laughed, the sound echoing off the surrounding buildings. "There is no after. You die here." The human's expression didn't change, but somehow the air in the simulation seemed to grow colder. When Marcus spoke again, his voice carried an edge that made hardened warriors shiver. "No," he said quietly. "You do." The observation deck held its collective breath as the two figures faced each other in the ruined street. The massive Brutari warrior, armed with weapons that could level buildings, against the slight human with his single blade. It should have been no contest. It wasn't. Gorton charged with the unstoppable force of an avalanche, his massive warhammer crackling with energy fields that could shatter bunkers. The ground shook beneath his thunderous footsteps as he closed the distance to his target in seconds. To any observer, the outcome seemed inevitable. The tiny human would be crushed like an insect. Marcus sidestepped. It was such a simple movement that several instructors initially missed it. No dramatic leap, no desperate dive, just a single step to the left. Gorton's charge carried him past his target, and the Brutari warrior's momentum sent him crashing through the wall of a nearby building. "Impossible," breathed Professor Corvath. "Gorton's species can change direction mid-charge. How did the human know he couldn't adjust?" Commander Zexhi's crystalline features reflected growing unease as he studied the replay. He didn't know. He made Gorton unable to adjust. The revelation hung in the air like a death sentence. On the tactical display, they could see the truth that had been hidden by the simplicity of Marcus's movement. Just before sidestepping, the human had dropped something small and metallic directly in Gorton's path. When the Brutari's massive foot came down on the object, it had shifted his weight just enough to lock him into his current trajectory. "A simple ball bearing," the tactical AI confirmed. "Placed with precision timing to exploit the target's biomechanical limitations during high-velocity movement." Gorton emerged from the rubble, his armor cracked but his fury intact. "Stand still and fight like a warrior." Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if considering the request. "Warriors fight to win. Anything else is just ritual combat." The distinction seemed to mean something important to the human, though the watching instructors couldn't understand why. Gorton certainly didn't appreciate the philosophical lesson. He raised his warhammer above his head, energy crackling between its twin heads as he prepared to bring devastating force to bear. Marcus drew his knife. The blade itself was unremarkable. Standard military issue, carbon steel, nothing that would register as significant on any tactical scanner. But the way Marcus held it, the way he moved as Gorton swung, made it clear that this was not a tool, but an extension of the human himself. The warhammer descended with enough force to crater the street. Marcus wasn't there to receive it. He was inside Gorton's guard, the knife sliding between armored plates with surgical precision. The Brutari's roar of fury turned into a gasp of shock as his nervous system registered damage that should have been impossible to inflict. "Pressure point manipulation," Commander HFY muttered, his understanding growing darker by the moment. He's targeting nerve clusters specific to Brutari physiology. Gorton swung wildly, trying to catch the human with his massive fists. Each blow could have pulverized stone, but Marcus flowed around the attacks like water, never quite where the Brutari expected him to be. With each missed swing, another precise cut appeared on Gorton's body. Not fatal wounds, but carefully calculated injuries that gradually reduced the warrior's mobility and strength. "This is impossible!" Gorton's voice carried genuine panic now. "No species studies Brutari anatomy in such detail." Marcus paused in his attack, and for a moment something almost like sympathy crossed his features. "Every species' anatomy is studied in such detail. The galaxy is smaller than you think." The knife moved one final time. Gorton collapsed, not dead but completely paralyzed, his massive form dissolving into elimination sparkles as the simulation registered his defeat. In the observation deck, Professor Korvath's energy form flickered with what could only be described as terror. "He knows our physiology, all of our physiologies. How is that possible?" "Cross-reference human databases," Commander HFY ordered. "Look for any records of anatomical studies on Galactic Council species." While the computers searched, the simulation continued its deadly progression. The Mindari Alliance had lost 2 members to a clever trap set by the remaining arachnids. The Vorthak forces were systematically eliminating anyone who ventured into their controlled territory. But in the center of it all, Marcus continued his unhurried walk through the chaos. What had begun to disturb the observers was not just his combat effectiveness, but the pattern of his movement. He wasn't randomly wandering or even systematically clearing areas. His path through the battlefield followed a specific route, one that seemed to serve no tactical purpose they could identify. Computer analysis indicates subject is following a predetermined pattern, the tactical AI reported. Path optimization suggests knowledge of simulation parameters not available to participants. What kind of knowledge? Commander HFY's voice had grown dangerously quiet. Complete architectural schematics, hidden passage locations, automated defense system positioning, and optimal elimination sequences for maximum efficiency. The implications hit the observation deck like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't fighting his way through the simulation. He was executing a plan that had been formulated before the challenge even began. A plan that required intimate knowledge of not just the battlefield, but of every species participating in the assessment. "Sir," one of the junior instructors ventured, "perhaps we should halt the simulation. If the human has accessed classified information—" "He hasn't accessed anything," Commander HFY interrupted. "He already knew." The terrible truth was beginning to dawn on them all. The quiet human who claimed to be a systems analyst, who admitted his species had conquered nothing, who appeared to have no combat training whatsoever, possessed detailed intelligence on every aspect of the Galactic Council's most secure military installation. "Database search complete," the tactical AI announced. "No records found of human anatomical studies on Council species. However, correlation analysis suggests human knowledge base extends beyond publicly available information." Professor Korvath's energy form dimmed with growing dread. "How far beyond?" "Current behavioral patterns indicate detailed knowledge of Council military doctrine. Species-specific combat techniques, facility schematics, and psychological profiles of participating personnel." The observation deck fell silent, except for the continuing sounds of battle from the simulation below. On the tactical display, Marcus had reached what appeared to be his final destination, a nondescript building in the simulation's central district. To any casual observer, it looked identical to dozens of other structures in the urban environment. But as the instructors watched, Marcus walked directly to what appeared to be a solid wall and pressed his hand against a specific section. A hidden panel slid aside, revealing an entrance that didn't appear on any official schematic. "That passage doesn't exist," whispered one of the architects who had designed the simulation. "We never built any hidden entrances in that sector." "But it's there," Commander HFY observed grimly, "which means someone modified your simulation without your knowledge." The implications were staggering. If Marcus had the ability to alter advanced Galactic Council simulations, what else might he be capable of? More importantly, how long had this capability existed, and how much did humanity really know about the Council's supposedly secret military capabilities? Inside the hidden passage, Marcus moved with the confidence of someone following a familiar route. Emergency lighting flickered on as he passed, illuminating walls lined with what appeared to be maintenance equipment. But the sophisticated surveillance systems tracking his movement registered something far more disturbing. "Those aren't maintenance tools," Professor Korvath's voice carried barely controlled panic. "Those are weapons, military-grade equipment that's not supposed to exist in any simulation." "They're real," Commander HFY confirmed, his understanding of the situation reaching new and terrifying depths. "Someone installed an actual weapons cache in our training facility." The hidden room Marcus entered contained enough firepower to level a small city. Plasma rifles, quantum disruptors, gravitational bombs, and devices whose purpose the observers couldn't immediately identify. All of it organized with military precision, all of it clearly intended for use by someone who knew exactly what they would find. Marcus selected a single item from the arsenal, a device no larger than his fist that pulsed with ominous energy. As he attached it to his belt, the tactical AI's analysis sent chills through the observation deck. Device identified, quantum displacement generator, theoretical weapon capable of localized space-time disruption. No known countermeasures. Theoretical? Commander HFY's 4 eyes fixed on the display with growing horror. Correction. Theoretical until now. Quantum signatures confirm device is fully functional. Marcus emerged from the hidden room and resumed his walk through the simulation. But now his movements carried a different quality. Not the casual stroll of someone exploring, but the purposeful stride of someone approaching their true objective. Behind him, the weapons cache detonated in a controlled explosion that sent shockwaves through the entire facility. Not enough to cause real damage, but sufficient to demonstrate that the human had access to capabilities that made him more dangerous than entire fleets. On the tactical display, the remaining cadets continued their desperate struggle for survival, unaware that their competition had fundamentally changed. What they thought was a test of their combat skills had become something else entirely. A demonstration of power that defied everything the Galactic Council thought it knew about humanity. "Sir," one of the instructors whispered. "What do we do?" Commander HFY stared at the figure of Marcus Chen as the human approached the final phase of his mysterious plan. The quiet systems analyst who had been mocked and ridiculed by every other cadet was about to reveal capabilities that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what humanity represented. "We watch," the commander said grimly, "and we learn what it means when Earth sends just one representative." The simulation was about to end, but the real demonstration was just beginning. Marcus reached the simulation's central command tower as the final minutes counted down. Around him, the surviving cadets fought desperately for position, unaware that their competition had already been decided. The Mindari Alliance controlled the eastern sector, the Vorthak Brutari Coalition held the high ground, and scattered individuals from various species struggled to avoid elimination. None of them noticed the human entering the most heavily defended position in the entire simulation. The tower's automated defenses should have been impossible to bypass. Energy barriers, kinetic shields, adaptive AI systems, and quantum locks all protected the central command center. But Marcus walked through them as if they didn't exist, each defensive system mysteriously malfunctioning just moments before he reached it. "He's not bypassing the defenses," Professor Korvath's energy form flickered with terrified understanding. He's commanding them. Commander Zexhi's crystalline features reflected the harsh light of realization. Full security scan, now. I want to know how deep this infiltration goes. As the tactical AI ran its analysis, Marcus reached the command center's primary console. The room was a masterpiece of Galactic Council technology, with holographic displays showing real-time positions of every cadet, weapon system, and tactical asset in the simulation. At the center of it all sat the Master Control Interface, supposedly accessible only to the simulation's administrators. Marcus placed his hand on the interface. It responded instantly. "Access granted," the system announced in its neutral electronic voice. "Welcome back, Administrator Chen." The observation deck erupted in chaos. Instructors shouted questions, security alerts blared, and emergency protocols activated throughout the facility. But through it all, Commander Zexhi's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Silence!" The authority in his voice was absolute, born from decades of command experience. When the room quieted, he spoke directly to the communication system. "Marcus Chen, you will identify yourself immediately." Marcus looked up at the observation windows, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, his expression showed genuine emotion, not anger or fear, but something far more unsettling: disappointment. "I am exactly who I said I was," Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly through the facility's speakers. "A systems analyst, a civilian contractor, someone Earth sent to observe your assessment." "The weapons cache," Commander Zexhi pressed. "The security breaches, the administrative access. Explain." Marcus turned back to the control console, his fingers moving across displays with practiced familiarity. "Earth's military doctrine is primarily defensive in nature. We focus on cost-effective solutions and resource optimization. I told you this." "That doesn't explain—" "It explains everything." Marcus interrupted, and the quiet authority in his voice made every instructor fall silent. "You assumed defensive meant passive. You assumed cost-effective meant inferior. You assumed our lack of conquered worlds indicated weakness." The central display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the sanitized version used in council briefings. This map showed everything: fleet positions, supply routes, communication networks, and defensive installations, information that was classified at the highest levels of galactic security. "Earth studies its neighbors very carefully," Marcus continued, manipulating the display to highlight specific systems. "We map their capabilities, analyze their weaknesses, and prepare contingencies, not for conquest, but for survival." Professor Korvath's energy form pulsed with growing horror. "Those are classified council positions. How do you have access to strategic military intelligence?" "We don't." Marcus's reply was matter-of-fact. "We create it." The implications hit the observation deck like a physical assault. If humanity could penetrate council security deeply enough to map classified military assets, what else might they be capable of? More importantly, how long had this surveillance been ongoing? "Security scan complete," the tactical AI announced. "Analysis reveals systematic infiltration of council networks dating back approximately 12 standard years. Infiltration depth? Total." Commander Zexhi felt his crystalline structure vibrate with shock. 12 years. For over a decade, humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing. Every council meeting, every strategic decision, every supposedly secret military development, all of it observed and cataloged by a species the galaxy considered primitive. "The Reaper," he whispered. The pieces finally falling into place. "You're the Reaper." Marcus paused in his manipulation of the displays. When he looked up at the observation windows, his brown eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps they had always been there, carefully hidden behind a facade of unremarkable humanity. "That's not a name I use anymore," Marcus said quietly. "But yes, during the Border Wars, I served the Council in a different capacity." The Border Wars had been the galaxy's darkest hour, when extragalactic invaders had threatened to destroy everything the Council species had built. Victory had come at a terrible cost, aided by mysterious allies who struck from the shadows and eliminated key enemy positions with surgical precision. The Reaper had been the most successful of these phantom warriors, credited with eliminating entire enemy command structures without ever being seen or identified. But the Reaper disappeared after the wars, Professor Korvath protested. The entity vanished completely. There were no records, no traces, no evidence it had ever existed. "Because I went home," Marcus replied simply. "Earth was finally ready for contact with the galaxy, and my work was done. I retired." "Retired?" Commander Zexhi's voice cracked with disbelief. "You don't retire from being a galactic legend. You don't go from being the most feared warrior in Council history to being a civilian contractor." Marcus smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "You don't understand humans very well. For us, war is a job. When the job is finished, we go home to our families and find peaceful work. Only people who enjoy killing make it a permanent career." The observation deck fell silent as the full scope of humanity's deception became clear. Earth hadn't sent an untrained civilian to the assessment. They had sent their most accomplished warrior. But more than that, they had sent a message, a demonstration that their greatest weapon was someone who would rather analyze systems than destroy them. "The assessment," Commander Zexhi said slowly. "This was never about testing human capabilities." "No," Marcus agreed. "It was about testing yours." The central display shifted again, now showing detailed analyses of every species represented in the Academy. Combat techniques, psychological profiles, strategic doctrines, and tactical preferences, all observed and cataloged during the assessment. Information that would be invaluable for someone planning either alliance or warfare. "You've been studying us," Professor Korvath accused. "We study everyone," Marcus corrected. "The galaxy is dangerous, and Earth believes in being prepared. But studying doesn't mean threatening. We prefer to understand our neighbors rather than conquer them." The quantum device on Marcus's belt pulsed with energy, drawing every eye in the observation deck. "What is that weapon for?" Commander Zexhi demanded. Marcus looked down at the device, then back up at his audience. "Insurance. In case this conversation went badly and I needed to ensure Earth's safety." "You would threaten the entire Academy?" "I would protect my species from those who might harm it." The steel in Marcus's voice left no doubt about his capabilities or his resolve. "But that doesn't appear to be necessary. You're reasonable people having a reasonable conversation." The simulation timer reached 0, officially ending the assessment. Of the 50 cadets who had entered, only 8 remained. The survivors included members of the Mindari Alliance, several Vorthak warriors, and one arachnid who had outlasted all her companions through clever tactics. Marcus walked to the center of the command room and placed both hands on the master control interface. "Assessment complete. All participants performed admirably. My recommendation is that the Council Academy continue its current training protocols with one modification." "What modification?" Commander Zexhi asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "Include humanity in future assessments, not as participants, but as advisors. We have perspectives that might be useful." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Work with humanity as equals, or continue to underestimate them at the galaxy's peril. The choice was clear, even if the implications were terrifying. "And if the Council refuses?" Professor Korvath asked. Marcus deactivated the quantum device and clipped it back to his belt. Then Earth will continue to watch and prepare, as we always have. We don't require your approval to protect ourselves. Commander HFY studied the human for a long moment, seeing past the unremarkable appearance to the deadly intelligence beneath. What guarantees do we have that humanity won't use this intelligence aggressively? The same guarantee you've always had, Marcus replied. We've had the capability to destroy any of you for 12 years. The fact that you're still here should tell you everything about our intentions. The truth of that statement settled over the observation deck like a shroud. If humanity had wanted conquest, they could have achieved it long before any council species realized the threat. Instead, they had chosen to remain hidden, to watch and prepare, to defend rather than attack. The council will need time to consider this, Commander HFY said finally. Marcus nodded. Of course. But while you're considering, remember that Earth sent only one representative to your assessment. One person who walked through your best defenses, neutralized your finest warriors, and demonstrated capabilities you didn't know existed. He began walking toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. Imagine what we could accomplish together instead of separately. As Marcus left the facility, the surviving cadets were being debriefed about their performance. None of them mentioned the quiet human who had wandered through the simulation, and the official records would show that Earth's representative had been eliminated early due to inadequate preparation. But in the classified reports that would reach the highest levels of council leadership, a different story would be told. The story of humanity's true capabilities and the choice the galaxy now faced. Work with the humans as equals or continue to underestimate the species that had been watching them all along. The Reaper had retired, but his legacy would shape the future of galactic civilization. Earth had sent only one representative, and it had been more than enough.